Hi, I'm Bo Humphreys, and this is episode 99
Yeah.
of the Personal Finance Show. So normally I would be like, the guest wants you to do whatever. I'd come up with that intro after listening to the whole episode. And what was the theme? What was the point of view that came out? But this one's easy because it's Beth MacMillan wants you to travel.
That's right.
Or prioritize travel. Is it important to just always have it on top of the list?
For me, it is.
Yes.
I mean, that's a personal choice, but yes, I think travel is important. I think it's important to learn about yourself and learn about the world and
the perspective that it gives us. Right?
Absolutely.
And I mean, we're going to get into this a little bit later, but spending your money on travel, is it always worth it?
Yes, I think it's the most worthwhile investment you can make.
Fantastic. That's a great quote right there. So Beth is my sister-in-law. We'll just put that right out of the bat. And the reason why she's on the show is because Beth and her husband Mark, and who's my brother-in-law, they prioritized a 6-month honeymoon for their wedding.
That's right.
In 2011, right?
Yes, 2011, 2012.
Yeah,
yes.
Into 2012, yeah.
Correct.
Which is just coincidentally when I came into the picture.
Right.
And so they had this torture of meeting this new boyfriend of a sister from afar.
Right.
And having to be like, who is this? We want to meet him, but not for like 4 months or something like that.
That's right. Yeah, you came into the scene and we saw lots about you on social media, but we didn't know who you were.
Yeah.
We had lots of guesses, but it wasn't until we came home that we met you.
And then you were like, oh no.
Bo.
Oh no, this guy. He doesn't stop talking. He should have his own podcast or something like that.
He should probably do this professionally, yes.
So yeah, just maybe move the mic a little bit closer to your mouth.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, then that's perfect. So I'll probably just leave that in the show too, right? Because, this is real life, everybody. It's not just like cut, right?
Yeah, this is us chatting while our babies are sleeping
exactly.
And getting some work done.
Taking advantage because, and we'll talk about this too. We just went on a family trip with 2 babies, and that would probably just exclude the option for most people, the fact that there are 2 babies under the age of 1
right.
In the same place. But we can say that we made it work.
We made it work, and again, we prioritized that travel because it was important to us.
And you don't have a lot of time off, and that's something we'll get into too, in terms of like balancing time and money, right?
Absolutely.
That's the biggest challenges, obviously.
That's absolutely the biggest challenge once you're an adult like us.
Yeah. Oh, we're adults now.
I know.
Well, babies, that's the biggest sign, right?
Yeah, that's when it happened.
That's when it happened, yeah. So... But first, we need to know a little bit about you in terms of like just kind of your relationship with money and how it came to be this way. So I guess the I won't go the earliest money memory unless you have one on the top of your head, but I will ask, how was your relationship with money when you were growing up? Were you a spender? Would you always put money aside, like say in high school when you were working, that kind of thing?
I was more of a spender, I'd say, early on.
Yeah.
Babysitting, I would spend whatever money I had. And then my first job was working in fast food. I had a job at Taco Bell. Nice. It was my first steady paycheck. And it seemed no matter how many hours I worked, I would always maintain a balance in my bank account of $200.
Always there. Is it intentional? Or
no, it just seemed I spent whatever I made above and beyond that unintentionally. And yeah, it just seemed like that's about how much I could save. And then probably about a year into having that job, I was in my last year of high school in OAC, and my French class was organizing a trip to Europe.
Okay.
And I was brought to the meeting with some of my friends. Never had been on a plane before. Never.
No, not even. Oh, you drove down to say.
Yeah, we traveled a lot in the car as a family. We did a lot of family road trips within North America. But I had never traveled abroad before.
Okay.
And I went to that meeting, and I remember bringing the paper home to my mom and saying, this is a lot of money, but do you think this is something I could do? And she said, you have a job. That's a reasonable amount of money that you could save.
Okay.
And then from there, I started working extra hours, saving every penny that I earned. And within a reasonable amount of time, I had the trip paid for. And that was kind of my first flavor of saving to travel.
That's incredible. And we should probably mention at this time that, there's some privilege there. Like your parents had money, and
absolutely,
they,
they were very encouraging.
They took care of all the other things, right? So that you didn't have to worry about that.
Right.
But this was something that was, it's a good early goal for money to teach your children, like, hey, save up for this, like just like your mom said.
Right. Yeah. They weren't offering to pay for the trip, but you're right. They were very encouraging. I think they paid for the gas money for me to drive to and from my job at the time as a supplement to help me save the money. An
incentive, right? I mean,
exactly.
So, because you might be like, well, I don't think I can do this. I don't know. So they did what they could without like giving it to you. And I think it's such a great balance for parents. You got to find that balance, right? Of like helping your kids, but not like handing them things. Right.
It was a great lesson, and it kind of followed me through the rest of my, my school career. And I mean, I guess now with my traveling as well.
Yeah. So that's really awesome. So early on, you're able to, and then so you went on this trip.
Right.
And did it just change?
Yeah,
for you?
It really did. It was mind blowing. I mean, I could go to art museums that I had been studying for years in my art class. I could use the French that I'd been learning since I was 4 years old. And, I came home and had all these stories and all these pictures. And then that kind of spurred my parents on to travel. And within a year, they were overseas for the first time in Paris as well.
I do love that part of the story.
Yeah.
That like you inspired them to try, like watching your kids go places, and then you go, and now they're avid travelers.
Right. They inspired me, and I in turn got to inspire them, which is really neat.
Well, it just seems like it's an ideal situation for everybody. And you felt that money was well spent because you didn't have like a whole bunch of things on the list. Right. Like jeans, or I want that new pair of jeans.
Yeah, and maybe that's because that happened fairly early on when I was still impressionable. Now I would still rather spend my money on travel than buy the designer jeans or the bigger house
or material things,
right?
Or experiences. That's a really good point. Maybe if people get that experience early and know how much it costs, because if you just go on trips all the time when you're a kid, but you don't realize that it costs money and there's value, I think using your own money early. That's a good one. I was wondering if there was like a secret, the reason, because some people they just like travel and there's no explanation.
Well, I mean, like I said, my parents were always great to take us everywhere, and we often had a minivan or some sort of car that we could just all pile into, and we spent time going to the East Coast to visit family, or down to Florida or Myrtle Beach when it was warm. So we were accustomed to having a vacation be a fun thing to look forward to.
Okay, so you're making your way through school. So you end up going to pharmacy school. You get your undergrad first.
Right. I get my undergrad at University of Windsor. Again, my parents were very instrumental in that they encouraged me to pay my own tuition in exchange for living at home without paying rent. And, they helped us fund a car to get to and from university.
Amazing.
But at the same time, we had to learn to save so that we could pay for our schooling. And then if there was extra money in the summers or, saving up to try to travel. Yeah.
So you're able to, again, that balance. You paid for school by working and some loans?
I didn't have any loans until I went to my second degree in pharmacy school. I worked crazy hours during the summer to try to pay for my tuition, basically.
And is it because there was a overall like family aversion to debt? Like what was debt like in your family? Did anyone talk about it as bad or good? Or?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely discouraged. I mean, if I had to have a student loan to pay for tuition, I certainly would have, and I did eventually need to do that with my pharmacy tuition being higher. But certainly it was encouraged to do it as much on my own as I could, and because I could work enough hours in the summer to save enough money for tuition, it seemed like the easy thing to do. I definitely remember maybe after my third year of university, having this great idea to travel around Europe with a friend of mine for a month in the summer. Okay. We kind of made a rough plan, and I pitched it to my parents, and they were like, if you do that, then you can't pay for your tuition.
It's negative. Right?
Yeah, exactly. How are you going to make that work? And I, at that time, couldn't find a find a way. So I think that kind of planted the seed for later. But at the time, I decided not to and took a smaller vacation within Canada instead.
Okay, so as much as you wanted to, and you maybe you had credit cards at this point too?
Yeah, I probably did.
And you could have probably put a trip on a credit card? Yeah,
that just never really occurred to me at the time. Yeah.
Like, why would I even do that? It's like, I wish more people had this mindset, like, why would I do that, right?
Yeah.
When I can't afford it. And meanwhile, they have the opposite mindset.
Right.
Did you have friends who were doing that at all? Did you have a good group of good influencers in your life?
A little bit of both.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I could probably see both sides of it.
But you just you never would pull the debt trigger on that.
Yeah, I feel like there's probably a little bit of not wanting to let my parents down at that point,
sure.
Since they were supporting me with living at home and whatnot.
That's nice,
so.
Right? It's like they're giving of themselves, and you have respect for that, and so
right.
Yeah, a little bit of that. Yeah, well, that's great restraint, and you knew that one day you would do this travel. You're planning. You're doing all this planning.
Yeah, I mean that's always the goal, right? There's always the next trip.
There's always the next trip, which is not always everybody's goal, but
in
this family, it's always the next trip, and it's really nice. Even when we're on one trip, sometimes we're talking about the next.
Oh, that's the best time to talk travel because you're relaxed
you're traveling.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's another thing, right? Is the prioritizing of it is having the idea, and then you learn, and you can then find out how to do it for whatever your budget might be. What's possible, what's not. The more we talk about it, if you just think that it's something that's unattainable, well, it's never going to happen, right?
That's right.
It's picturing things. So, okay, yeah, so pharmacy school. Now, just to talk about that for a sec, that's something that would be a little more justified for student debt because you kind of have, were you at that point, I'm not going to say guaranteed, but was it likely you were going to get a job in pharmacy after that?
Yeah, I was definitely going into pharmacy at a good time where it was assumed that I would have a well-paying job when I finished. Yeah. So even then, I still worked during school and worked full-time every summer to minimize that debt.
Sure.
So my goal, which I think worked out every year, was that I would take out an OSAP loan during the year, and then I would pay it off over the summer as I worked.
Did you do that?
I did, yes.
So did you graduate with no debt?
Again, I was lucky enough to graduate at a time that pharmacists were in high demand.
Okay.
So because I agreed to go back to my hometown, which was considered kind of a underserviced area,
sure,
I was given a signing bonus for the first bit of my career.
Do you feel like talking about numbers or no?
Sure, yeah. So I grew up in Windsor, which is far from Toronto, I guess.
Yeah,
so
far enough, yeah.
So when I signed with a big company, they gave me $10,000 to work for them for a year.
Wow, just a bonus.
Right,
Did
just
you
a
have to
bonus.
stay for the year?
I had to stay for the year.
Okay, so that's an incentive too. Plus, you're making pharmacy money, which is like an average salary. Could you throw one out there for? This is retail pharmacy.
Yeah, this is retail pharmacy.
Working
at a Shoppers or a Rexall.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what your annual would be, but a typical starting salary at that time was $45 an hour for a pharmacist.
And that sounds pretty fantastic for probably most people listening.
For coming out of school, it's amazing. Yeah, I don't think it's quite that strong anymore for people coming out of school, unfortunately, but I was just hitting it at the exact right time.
So, I mean, there's a lot of talk about people going into debt for school and not having a job on the other side, right? And the debt might be the same debt amount as someone who has a market that is willing to hire them. Right. And so we have to think about these things ahead of time. Did you have that in mind at all, or you just liked pharmacy? Yeah,
I mean, a little bit of both, certainly.
Sure.
I did a full undergrad degree before I applied to pharmacy.
What was it in? Did I even know this?
General science.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I thought I might be an engineer or a teacher, and I just couldn't really decide. And then I was working, that was my part-time job when I was doing my undergrad, was working in pharmacy. And by the end of it, I was like, why don't I do this? I enjoy it, and it will pay me well when I finish. And
your mom was the influence. We should mention that your mom worked in pharmacy as an assistant.
She's a pharmacy assistant.
And until just, I guess, last year, right?
Yeah, about a year ago.
Yeah, when the babies came.
When the babies came and she retired.
She's like, I'm retiring now.
Yeah.
That's that.
Yeah, I have another thing I need to do now.
Exactly. And definitely prioritizing for her, right? So, So influence, and you saw that this was a place where you wanted to, or you felt like you could work, and where you might want to be, and so you pursued this, and then you knew that there was a job coming on the other side.
Right.
This bonus thing. Now, not everybody got this. You were lucky. Not everybody got bonuses out of university. So timing
was right, and the fact that I wanted to go back to my hometown, which, if I would have stayed in Toronto and worked there, that wouldn't have happened.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to cut back my hours in my 4th year of pharmacy school and only work once a week, so that I wasn't as worried about saving money while I was in school.
So that's a big deal too, because I think a lot of people are like, I'm never going back.
Right.
Right. And also probably opportunities come and they think, oh, that's not for me. Meanwhile, short-term pain, or not pain, but in your case,
it worked into my
but it's like, short-term, maybe not exactly where you wanted to be at that point, because you were building lives in other cities, right?
I started that job before I met my husband, so I didn't really know where I wanted to be, and going back home made as much sense as
it made sense
anywhere else.
Yeah.
So if I would have signed, there were like a larger signing bonus, and they could send you anywhere basically in Canada. So if I would have been braver or wanted more, if I had bigger debt, I could have been sent somewhere
like the Yukon,
Northern Ontario, that sort of thing. And but it was a safe bet for me to do the Windsor.
And I think this is still happening in various parts of the healthcare system, right?
Oh, I'm sure.
To go in underserviced areas.
Absolutely.
And, so if you're open to opportunity, take it if you can. Like, don't, that's, again, Beth MacMillan wants you to travel, but also to be open to opportunity, is it right?
Right.
Is another theme of this.
And I mean, it was really a function of the time in my life, right? Like I wasn't married. I didn't have kids. I didn't have anything tying me anywhere. So I was lucky in that respect that I could kind of go where the money was.
And take those opportunities when you can, because one day you'll have a baby and or, just have a house and a baby.
Yeah, and you'll have roots and
exactly.
So now I'm a little bit more planted.
Yes, and we will get to that. So you are now debt-free and making buckets of money, right?
It felt like it. Oh my gosh. After being a somewhat poor student living very within my means, all of a sudden. And, I had rotations where I was unpaid at the end of my pharmacy degree. So I remember my first few paychecks being like, I can't believe they're paying me to do this now.
That's awesome. And did you try to maintain your lifestyle, or did you have a little bit of lifestyle inflation? Because you're like, well, I have some disposable income now. Yeah,
well, I did buy a nice car when I graduated, so that was my one splurge. I did. I had a 3-year lease on a Ford Mustang.
Oh,
so
the Mustang. You always wanted a Mustang.
I did, yeah.
Well, everyone should have that splurge. I mean, I was talking to the loony doctor earlier this year, and he bought himself this like great weight set that he wanted, right? Like, he's like, I'm a doctor now.
Right.
I'm going to buy this. But it was still like, buy yourself one thing. Don't just go out to Vegas every weekend, you know, because you think that's what this money's for. Like, you spent a lot of time in school, right? People, and you paid for it, which was, and you worked hard. And like, this is what, you should have a balance of the two, right? So you did that, and I'm sure you're living comfortably, but you were still living at home?
Yeah, at that time I lived at home with my parents for the year after I graduated, and they did charge me rent then because I could afford to pay it.
Because they're smart people.
Yes.
They're like, wow, I know how much you're making now.
Yeah.
Let's take care of this. So that's amazing. You can give back, right?
Right.
Not that they, needed it or anything like that, but, another person in the house does cost more money, right?
Sure.
And so... And they probably spent, like we said, they gave you money for gas to get to your job so you could save for going on a trip. It's like, it's nice to be able to pay your parents back when you can, right?
Right. And I do believe they put aside part of what I was paying them in rent to give me back when I got married, which is amazing.
A lot of parents are secretly doing that now, I'm sure, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, like why this is amazing. Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
It's still, they're teaching you, they're going through the motions, and that's what was important, right? Because you would have had to pay rent in other places. And
exactly.
But you're able to save a bunch.
Right.
And now you're thinking about travel more and more.
Oh, absolutely.
You're always thinking about travel, but now you're like, this is feasible, this is doable.
Right.
Did you go somewhere big on your own before the big wedding trip?
I remember my dad and I were talking about when I got that money from signing for my first job.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, should I pay off my loan or maybe we should go somewhere? And
Yeah.
I was trying to talk my dad into going to Eastern Europe with me. And
Sure,
then
right?
we talked about it and I was like, oh, all right, I'll do the sensible thing and I'll pay off my loan.
So, these are good examples, but there's also the argument is easy on the other end too, because that's extra money and you can alone, maybe it's not even high interest, right?
Right.
You can continue to go, but there's something really good about
being debt free.
Did it feel really good?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
It's just a weight off the shoulders. And like you said, there's always other opportunities. And so that worked out.
Being debt free, you're more open to opportunities too.
That's right.
Right?
That's
a lot
right.
of things are adding up, right? You're free, you're debt free, right? And open to opportunities. So like you can go anywhere.
Right.
So where did you end up going travel-wise?
Probably about a year later, I went to South Korea and Japan.
Nice.
Not on my own, but with my then boyfriend and my brother. And
so one of the first big trips was with Mark.
Yes. Yeah, that was our first big trip together, and
Okay.
it was my first time in Asia. And it was kind of an eye-opening experience to be on the other side of the world like that.
Yeah, and now Mark. Was he working or was he in school at this point?
He was in school at that point.
And did you have conversations about who could afford this more or anything like that? Did that ever come up as you were dating? Is that kind of something that was a conversation I want to go here, but I can't afford that? Did anything come up like that?
Not really. I mean, so we dated long distance for a year, and then after a year we moved in together and he went back to school. Okay. So I was working full time and he was in school.
Oh,
so
wow. Yeah.
He wasn't really making any money. So it was more of is this important enough to do it even though Mark's in school right now? And I mean, the answer was usually yes.
You kind of, of course. So you kind of pushed it forward. You wanted to go together. Right. And so you ended up paying for this first trip.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that he had some contribution as well. And the first week that we were in South Korea, we were staying with friends of his. So that was a way for us to save money and make the trip affordable. Yeah, yeah.
So, another thing is if you feel like you can't, let's just take Mark as an example, right?
Right.
Because, he wasn't making pharmacy money.
Right.
And then he goes back to school too, right?
Right.
So that's negative money. But hey, as long as we can get there, I can get us a place to stay for free, which could probably save you thousands or $1,000 at least, right?
At least. And it was kind of a time sensitive thing because his friends were only going to be there for a short period of time. Yes. So it was the feeling of, well, if this is something we want to do, we might as well do it now. Well, we have someone there to show us around and somewhere we can stay. Yeah.
So there's always ways to, maybe someone can help with one bit and you can use your connections, right? That's valuable too, because a lot of people listening might be like, I'm not a pharmacist making $45 an hour. It's harder for me to save up money, and I want to acknowledge the privilege there, right?
Absolutely.
But as we will discuss, there are other ways to get places, and there are ways to make money when you get there too, right? As people can do if you just know where to look.
For sure.
Yeah. So so you go on this big trip, and you guys sort of you got the bug.
We got the travel bug, absolutely.
And now at some point you decide you're going to get married, and we don't have to get into that. But did you start talking about the long honeymoon early?
Yeah, maybe even before we were engaged. Sure. It was kind of always an idea. Uh-huh. I just felt like if we got married and then went back to work the Monday, I don't know, you wouldn't feel like anything was different. You'd just be going about your regular life. Whereas I thought if we had this great experience together, then that's something we can build our life on.
That's a really great idea. And, it sounds like a dream. And did it feel like a dream when you were planning it? Can we do this?
Oh, absolutely. It seemed like the impossible dream a few times, but it just seemed like everything was lining up to make it happen, to make it feasible.
Yeah.
So, Mark was finishing school and wrapping up his degree and didn't have a job yet. And I had finished out my contract and really was not loving where I was working. Okay. So I was in a position that I was ready to walk away from my job. And we were renting, and our lease was up on our rent.
It all kind of came together.
Yeah, my Mustang was at the end of its 3-year lease. So we were in a place where we had no debt, we had no obligations.
Yeah.
And before Mark started looking for a job and before I started looking for a different job, it kind of seemed like the pieces fit together. It was the perfect time. If we were ever going to do this, it was the right time.
Okay, so this is a 6-month trip around the world.
Right.
I mean, for all intents and purposes.
Right.
I mean, you can't go everywhere in the world.
No,
but
correct.
But, I mean, you're going full circle in that you did end up in London and you came back that way, right? So you're going down and around and back up, right?
Yep.
I'm looking at a circle in my head right now.
You described a perfect globe.
You're doing the globe thing no one can see this but me.
Yes.
So, yeah, why don't you just give us a quick list of cities just so we have a framework
Or
in perfect order? No.
You
probably remember.
Can I do countries instead?
Yeah,
okay.
instead.
All right. That might be a little bit less lengthy. So we left from Toronto and we had to fly to England to start our around the world flight.
Because of the conditions of the ticket.
Yes. So we flew from Toronto to Iceland, to England, to Peru, and then we traveled overland through Bolivia, Argentina, and Chile.
Mm-hmm.
And then we flew to New Zealand, Fiji, Australia, then up to Singapore, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos, back through Thailand, and then back to England and then home.
Amazing. And
incredible.
If you're ever visiting your parents, you can see this
right.
mapped out on the wall with a string.
That's right.
Which is a very
world map.
Nice way to look at it.
Right.
And it's been there probably ever since.
Right.
This is we should say this is we did already say 2011, right?
Yeah. So it'll
through
be
2012.
My anniversary is actually tomorrow. So 8 years tomorrow.
Oh, that's amazing.
It'll be almost 8 years.
Yeah.
That we left.
The 10th.
The 10th.
Yeah. So I didn't know you guys. So I wasn't invited to the wedding.
No.
But that's okay.
Not on the list.
I forgive you because you didn't
For
know
not
I
knowing
existed. That's really the only excuse. So.
That's the only excuse.
So you get married and then you leave right away?
I think about 2 weeks later.
Okay, 2 weeks
We had enough
later,
time to pack up our apartment, ship stuff to various places.
So you don't renew the lease. You're packing everything up. You're storing stuff with parents, maybe.
Yeah.
Like all of the stuff or most of it.
Half of it probably at my parents and half with Mark's parents.
Okay, so let's talk money then.
Yes.
So Mark doesn't seem to have a lot of ability to save money because he's working on his further education.
Right.
Right, which is very important, right?
Right.
I mean, we're in a situation right now, right? That Kayla's in med school.
Yes.
And we can also say that Mark it paid off because he's a teacher, right?
Right.
So it wasn't
his teacher
it wasn't
degree.
His teaching degree.
He was upgrading to a bachelor degree.
But it was like the next step, and then he was eventually going to get to the place that he wanted to go. He knew that he needed to keep growing, right?
Right. Then that was the point of getting the degree because he felt like he wasn't going to be able to grow in his position unless he had a degree, and then. A couple of years down the road, he realized he wanted the teacher degree to grow even further. Yeah, and
that's, there's the lesson there. It might seem sometimes that, you're supporting somebody else, but it's for a reason, and it's definitely
temporary.
Coming back, to you. I don't know if you want to talk about the concussion very much, but would you like to talk? I thought you might want to talk about concussion awareness too.
Yeah, well, and I think it's also important to note that, yes, Mark's gone back to school a couple times while I've worked, but there's been other times where he's supported me as well, like when I was off for almost a year with concussion symptoms. So, and he was the one making the money to pay the mortgage and people don't even know you can't do anything, right? When you're concussed.
Yeah. And that's why we save money, right?
Yes, and thank goodness we had money saved at that point because Mark had just finished teacher's college and was just starting to look for a job when that all happened.
You had a house.
We had a house.
A mortgage payment, which that's the commitment right there, right? And luckily, no baby yet, right? Because I can only imagine how that would have been, right?
Yeah, I could hardly take care of myself, let alone
You can even open your eyes.
Yeah.
At times, right?
Yeah.
Or for days, or.
I was in the dark basement a lot.
Yeah, I think it's just good to talk about it a little bit because people don't know that a concussion can do this. If you ask a general person on the street, they probably wouldn't.
I wouldn't have known until I lived through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it can really, and if you ever wonder, why do I pay for insurance? Why do I have savings? Why do I need an emergency fund? It's because this was just a random occurrence in a sporting event, right?
Just a recreational soccer game for fun with my friends. And yeah, I mean, even though I am much better than I was, it still changed my whole life.
Yeah.
I mean, there's still things that I can't do. I will never play soccer again, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And, you know, my husband is still very protective of me because of this in anything active that I do, because he lived through it with me and he saw what a difference it makes.
Exactly. And so, I mean, the financial impacts there, I mean, you can... So let's get back to the
right,
because
that's a whole other
the point of this, I wanted to mention it at least, and so thank you for being able to talk about it. And I know that you support others who are, or try to support others who want to talk about it.
Absolutely.
Right? And you can decide at the end if you want to give any contact information or anything, or we can just wait and put a link in in whatever capacity you want to.
Yeah,
right?
It's a hard thing to navigate if you don't know where to find information. So absolutely.
That's right. So the idea there is you're working and Mark is working on himself, and it all kind of evens out. You know, and
over and over again.
But it's not an even sum game either, right?
No.
I mean, we all want to pull our weight, and it is hard to not work for a bit and pursue something for yourself, but it is for the family. And
absolutely,
yeah, not everybody's okay with that kind of situation, right?
Right. And I mean, our motto as a couple for employment and schooling, it's always been do it for the joy of what you do, not for the money. Mm-hmm. So Mark going back to school was never so that he could increase his earning potential. It was so that he could be happier in his job.
Yeah.
And, you know, as a wonderful side effect, he is going to make more money in the long run. But even if he wasn't, it wouldn't have been about that.
Yeah. If you don't focus on money first, usually there is a side effect of money.
Right.
It just happens. And if you focus too much on money, then you end up being miserable. So how are you able to save up? Do you have a number that you can give us for the cost of this trip for two people, or like a general number if you don't want to share yours?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We went into it with savings that we decided we would spend $20,000 for this honeymoon.
Amazing.
And I wanted to go for a year originally, actually. And when we did the numbers of even just dividing that $20,000 by 365 days, it wasn't really a feasible budget for a day-to-day budget.
I guess so, right?
So a lot of the reading I did before we went was figure out what your daily budget is that you can live within, and then, you know, build from there. So when you took that money and we divided it by 6 months, then it was about $50 a day. And I said, you know what? I think we can make that work. And based on that number, it kind of tailored where we went in the world. Because the company that sold us our round the world ticket, you could basically go anywhere. And there were some countries that we would have loved to have visited that would just not ever work within that budget.
Way too expensive. And then, of course, some are below the $50 amount and some are above, so you were maybe averaging out.
Yeah, so we tried to spend more time in South America and Southeast Asia because we knew those were more budget-conscious places, whereas when we were in New Zealand, we were way over budget, and so we only stayed there for 3 weeks to see as much as we could, but we knew that we were going to be spending a lot of money there.
Let's talk about this around the world ticket, because I don't know if a lot of people know. Did you know about it beforehand, or you heard about it?
I heard about it from a friend in England. My cousin married a guy from England, and his sister, Claire, had done that before.
Okay.
So I'm sure there could be companies who do it out of North America, but it was a familiar company because she had done it. And when I started researching it, I was baffled to see that it was less money for us to book a round the world ticket from England and buy a ticket to fly to England.
Yeah, to get to England,
than it was for us to just book flights to and from Sydney, Australia, which is somewhere we had wanted to go.
Wow.
So for less of a cost than flying to Sydney, we could go anywhere in the world we wanted to.
So I was dumb and I paid $2,200 to fly to Sydney because I flew Qantas.
Right. Qantas.
Yes. I mean, you got the chance to fly Qantas
We
too.
had one Qantas flight.
I just wanted to see what it was like. And so are you saying that that's like it costs around that per ticket?
Yes.
That is incredible, but you got to go to all these cities, I guess, along the way, in essence. Like
basically, yes.
Yeah, because you did end up, like, one of your furthest destinations was it Fiji the furthest or New Zealand?
Geographically, I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's a good, that's why I had that question. Cause
probably New Zealand, because Fiji you go north from New Zealand.
Like New Zealand maybe further south, and then you're kind of circling back, but around. The world is not straight lines.
No.
And it's confusing if you look at a map, right? So you're looking, it's just directly from here to there. No, it's all curved, right? So it's hard to pinpoint those things. But yeah, New Zealand is very far, and it's probably one of the furthest flights, unless you live on the west coast of Canada. But we're smack in the middle of it. And yeah, if you were to do a direct flight to New Zealand, you can't. Maybe from Vancouver?
Maybe. Yeah,
to Sydney, I know you can.
Right.
But
that's kind of a newer thing too, though. I don't think it was an option.
Yeah, it's because of the newer planes and gas capacity and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so you find out about this and you're like, this is amazing. All we need is time. And we've mostly talked about how it is you have time.
Right.
You made the choice, first of all.
I made the choice. I actually did ask my current employer at the time for a leave of absence for 6 months. And he couldn't find anybody who wanted to take a 6-month contract. So he said, I'm sorry, no.
Okay.
And then I made the decision. I did.
And we should always ask, right? Because I also asked my boss if I could do less work for less money.
Right.
And he made this is 2.5 years ago. He made a reasonable decision that he wanted me to be available to do things as, his subordinate that he could assign to me if he thought it was appropriate. And if I was just there doing piecemeal work for a couple hours a day, he couldn't do that. And I don't know if that was a similar case, but you were like working front-facing servicing clients, right?
Right. And I had a very set schedule.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And so, was that a disappointment for you? Were you worried about when you got back? Like, what was, like, to take this time off, what were the things, the risks or the things you had to give up?
Right. I mean, it was honestly a giant relief because I was not very happy in my job.
Yeah, that's what you were saying.
I was starting to wonder if pharmacy wasn't for me.
Really?
Because I wasn't able to practice the way that I thought I would. In school, you have all these ideals. Yeah. And I'm working in this job where somebody is telling me, what I should be doing with every hour of my time. Yeah. I'm not getting breaks. I'm even to go to the bathroom for 2 minutes. Someone's coming to find me and knocking on the door to say somebody needs my help.
Give me a break.
And the head office are the ones deciding how much help I get. Yeah. And it just didn't sit well with me because it didn't allow me the time to have the contact with patients that I wanted, and it wasn't where I wanted to be. So it was a really easy decision, and I knew that maybe I was naive because the culture or the marketplace of pharmacy has changed so much since I graduated. You don't just easily get a job with a signing bonus anymore. Yeah. But I just had the idea that I would be able to find a job when I got home, and I just didn't worry about it.
And probably because you and Mark were probably open to where you were going to come back.
Yeah, we had no idea where we were going to land when we came home, and we were
traveling around the world. You might hear some babies now. The babies they only sleep for so long. So, right. And huge kudos to my wife right now for looking after 2 babies.
Do you think they're both awake?
I don't know. I can't hear. You can hear better than me. That's why it's being picked up on your mic because it's facing that way.
I was hoping that wasn't mine.
I can't tell right now. But yeah, so, let's we got a little more to talk about. Thank you, Kayla. And so you save up this money. So you're taking a lot of risks here. I don't know. A lot of people, this would be scary, but you were like just at the position where you needed a clean break. And I think we need to be aware of those and then take advantage of those breaks too.
Yeah. It seemed like the time, and I don't know. I just almost felt like I didn't have a choice. I had to get away.
Yes. And so, I mean, doing it as a honeymoon is also helpful too, because I don't remember this. Did you ask for money for the trip? Was that one of your main things from guests or no?
No, we didn't do that. We did ask for gift cards
Yeah.
for a shower since we didn't know when we were going to
You
have a
didn't
house.
have a place to put things.
Yeah, we didn't need things.
Don't
so,
bring us things. Don't bring us a big glass vase
right.
or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, people were aware of that. So we did get a lot of gift cards, which was amazing when we came home and had to kind of furnish a place.
Yeah. Well, that's really awesome. And they don't expire anymore, gift cards, right?
Right.
So that's good to know.
Yep.
They used to. Did that also dictate how expensive the wedding was going to be as well?
I guess it probably did. I don't really remember too much. I mean, I think I had a budget for the wedding just because it seemed crazy to spend more than that on a wedding for one day. So I think the two were kind of exclusive. I definitely think we spent more on our honeymoon than we did on the wedding.
Yeah.
Intentionally.
Yeah, intentionally. Exactly. Okay, so round the world trip, and then do you have this all on paper before you're going, like all the numbers?
Not
or just
really.
Like generally, like the $50 a day thing.
$50 a day was kind of our benchmark, and we just had that in mind with everything we did. And
does that include the flight, or that's plus?
Yeah, that includes the flight.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we cataloged pretty much every dollar we spent every day. We had a logbook, and that helped guide us. Like if we would have just kind of, and we've had trips like this since where we just kind of have an idea of what we want to spend, but we don't really keep track of it. And then when we get home, we're like, oh, we were over budget. I wonder why.
Yeah.
But being accountable for every dollar that we spent really helped us stick to that as much as possible.
This is like personal finance gold.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It also helped us know when we could splurge.
Yeah,
because there's, travel can be expensive. And even in the countries that we were in that were maybe less expensive, there were like maybe an excursion or a trip that we would want to do that would cost more. And we'd be like, well, we've been living pretty responsibly for the last week or two. We've been saving money, so let's just go for it.
Yeah. So tracking and the concept of budgeting not being restrictive but freeing.
Yeah.
For the splurging capabilities, right? Oh, we have this available.
Yeah.
We can use this.
Let's just do it.
Right. And we have this set amount of money, or like roughly set. I mean, I'm sure.
Right.
Jumping ahead, did you have any money left?
Yeah, we went over budget.
You went over budget.
Yeah, I think we ended up spending $25,000.
Okay,
so
wow.
we went $5,000 over budget.
Now that leads to the question where this money was just sitting in a savings account.
Yes.
Nice. Like, so you had this specifically saved up. You knew you had a buffer.
Yeah. We weren't spending every penny that we had.
Yeah.
I would never be comfortable with that.
Yeah. So you even like saved up more than you would have ever needed, and this was just carved out. I guess we didn't talk about leading up to the wedding. You were working a lot.
Yes.
As much as you possibly could.
Yes.
And we need to mention this because this isn't just like I'm sitting, at a cubicle 9 to 5 and someone's giving me a salary. And you're just like doing the bare minimum. You're working additional like shifts as well, hours or things like that too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Multiple jobs or no, just the one?
At that point, it was just the one.
Yeah.
I would take extra shifts if they were offered and just try to pad that account as much as possible. And that was just kind of my nature from being in school.
Sure.
Like I would come home for the summers when I was in school and work like 21 or 30 day stretches just because that's what I did. So I was kind of already used to doing that. So there was a lot of weekends leading up to that. And I mean, that was part of the function of why I didn't love my job either, because my job had me working every other weekend anyway.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So there was a lot of weekends where I would be working in the summer and, Mark would maybe be studying or out with friends.
Yeah.
That was just the choice we made at the time. And
well, you had this goal in mind.
Yeah,
right?
that helps. You can get through those hard shifts.
A goal is key for this kind of thing. And, I always turn to Sean Cooper, who wrote Burn Your Mortgage, and he paid off his mortgage in 3 years because he lived in the basement and rented out the top, right?
Right.
Which is like, it seems like really genius right now. But
yeah.
It's like, why I'm one person? Why do I need a whole house, right?
For sure.
Do it early, right? But he also had this goal from the beginning, just sort of like you. Like home ownership is really important to me. For you, travel is important. I want to make this this dream come true. And there's a lot of goal setting stuff going on here, and just doing whatever you needed to do, like working hard. It doesn't mean you're gonna work hard like that your entire life, but you could at that time.
Yeah, I had no reason not to at that time. You know, if Mark was at home, he was probably studying, so it's not like we were going to be going out and doing something social. So it was kind of a, why not do this now?
Yeah, and then that set you up with even when you came back after not working for 6 months and spending $25,000, you still had money in the bank, right? From what you just said,
right?
And you got this great, like, fantastic experience. I hate to quickly go through any of these things. We could have another show about your trip, but what would you say was like a major takeaway for you from that long trip?
I think it was also like amazing marriage counseling too, because Mark and I spent every second together for 6 months, which is more time than most people probably spend in the first 5 years of their marriage.
That's right.
Also, we had to figure out conflict resolution really quickly because
great side benefit.
Yeah, we were depending on each other for every decision that we made. So we had to work together. If one of us was cranky or upset, we had to solve the issue right away so that we could get through whatever it was we were trying to sort out. And we had to figure out ways to deal with the fact that we both get hangry so that we can travel on throughout our day. So it was really good for us and growing together as a couple. Yeah,
so that's a big takeaway. Being a honeymoon and with a couple, right? Probably a very different solo trip. I mean, you're gaining all the perspective of being around the world and travel and stuff. But
for sure,
but
that's never a negative. I mean, you certainly would get so much benefit from doing that by yourself as well, because everywhere we went, we met other travelers. Depending on how you travel, you can get involved with local communities and really get into different cultures. So there's no negative.
So that's a good point. You don't have to be in a relationship. You can travel with a friend and hedge your costs that way. I mean, your accommodation costs were cut in half every time if you had them at all, if you weren't staying with people you knew.
And we could actually have done the trip so much cheaper if we were traveling as friends or not on our honeymoon, because a lot of the places we stayed, hostels or guest houses, we would get a private room because we didn't want to stay in a dorm.
Of course.
And we could have easily saved a ton of money if we were prepared to stay in a bunk bed in a dorm.
If you're open to that.
Right.
And like a lot of why I wanted to do this episode was to show people that you can travel, and there's a lot of different ways to do it. You can do this around the world trip and you can save and reach your goals, but like you just said, you can go and stay in a hostel for like $9 a night sometimes?
Or less.
Or less.
I remember a place.
What's the cheapest place? Yeah, when you guys, other than the private room thing.
Yeah. You could rent a hammock in a garden in Thailand for $1 a night. And
it's so nice.
And it's so nice. Yeah. Even the private rooms in certain countries we went were $8 a night.
Yeah. So you're splurging on a private room for $8.
Right. I remember one of our favorite places in Thailand was on a small island, and we splurged out huge and got our own little bungalow overlooking the ocean, and it was $30 a night. And it was pure heaven. And that included breakfast.
Yeah. We're going to use all of our money for this $30.
Yeah. It was so worth it.
And what it's done is you are now, I mean, I would consider you travel experts, right? Give or take. Not every country
we can
in the
give
world.
Recommendations on places we've been, certainly.
You know the difference between places and what place might be more feasible for someone of a different age or income level, right?
Right.
New Zealand, obviously, not easy to get to, not cheap, right?
No, but we learned a lot while we were there. Okay. We rented a camper van and traveled around for 3 weeks, which was incredible. What we didn't realize until after, when we went to rent a car in Australia, was that we could have had third-party insurance for like $1 a day, whereas we were foolish enough to get it with the rental car, which doubled our cost.
Yeah.
So we learned as we went.
These kinds of things, right?
Right.
And like you could have spent $100,000 on this trip.
Oh, for sure.
Or more.
Yeah. And we certainly could have went for longer. I think that's something that we learned, and ways to spend less money is slower travel.
Yeah.
We went to 15 countries, if we would have decreased the amount of places we went, we would have stayed places longer, which would have been less transit costs.
Yeah,
and
of course. And sometimes you get a better deal if you stay somewhere longer too.
Right.
Right. So yeah, those kinds of things, it sounds like a lot of money. It was 6 months, right?
Right.
That you spent, but you've taken trips since then that didn't cost you much, right?
Yeah.
Do you have any specific examples?
We went to Hawaii last year for just over $1,000 for a week.
Okay, for 2 people.
For 2 people. Now that was using Aeroplan miles
But
for our
still.
flights.
Well,
yes.
how'd you get those Aeroplan miles?
We just use our Visa for everything.
Again.
And then pay it off
right
away.
And there's a benefit. Like if you are a traveler and you have no trouble with credit, please
yes.
don't buy things you don't
right.
need. But just for your regular everyday spending, it adds up. It really does.
Yeah. Basically, once a year, we get a free flight somewhere, and we chose it. That trip, we wanted to go somewhere over March break because Mark's a teacher now, so we have to go at March break. And I was noticing that the same amount of points would get us anywhere in the U.S., which somehow included Hawaii. So
it's usually not. It's
yeah.
usually just continental states.
Yeah, so we went for it, and we camped for a week on Maui, and it was very easy to do economically.
Right? $500 a piece. Like you said you pool your finances, of course, but a lot of couples do not. And so when you look at it that way, that's really reasonable and shouldn't take very long. Now, of course, I'm generalizing. A lot of people don't have a lot of disposable income, but there will be a point, or hopefully there will be a point in your life when you do, and you make that choice to go out to dinner, the extravagant dinner, or take some of that money and put it in the vacation fund and make that option, right?
Yeah. We have a very nice budget set up using a spreadsheet that you gave us, Bo. And our travel budget is maybe a little ridiculous as a percentage of our general income, but that's what's important to us. And like you said, our budget for other things is lower because we would prioritize that.
Well, and a lot of the financial independence community talks about, just doubling up on the things that are important to you and just ruthlessly cutting back on things that you don't care about. Right? I know you enjoy experiences, and food is often a part of the experience. Right. So it's hard to, I would almost put that in the travel budget too, right? Like it's more, but like cooking at home is efficient ways that can save so much money, and housing, not buying too much house, right? Yeah. I'm sure you had the opportunity to buy, bigger houses in more expensive areas too, but you found the place that was a good balance for you. Yeah.
More important for us to have a smaller house that is easier to clean, and then we can afford to travel more.
Like, I don't know, sometimes you're in a situation where you can't help but pay money for certain things, but on the other hand, sometimes you just get this opportunity where you can stay at home in a period of your life, or save money on rent, or move in with somebody, or however it works. And it might seem like a sacrifice of some kind for some people to be in whatever area you don't want to be. It could just be short term, but it also enables the things you want to do.
Right.
And for you, it was, travel from the beginning. And I should mention India and Nepal as well, because there was a educational connection there. You guys kind of, was there did that save you money, or was it just an additional added value when you went to Nepal?
Probably a little bit of both.
Yeah, so can you tell us a little bit about
Yeah, we were traveling with a group from Wilfrid Laurier University, which is where Mark did his teacher's college. Yeah. It was organized by his teacher advisor, Judy, who goes every year and is involved with a local organization. And she was organizing teacher workshops in Kathmandu and kind of the surrounding area. Mm-hmm. So we were able to travel with them, which was a really great way to travel because we were involved with the local community. We had people from Nepal kind of helping to guide us. Yes. And we were able to visit communities that we would not have gone to as tourists.
And maybe someone would have tried to charge you a premium to get to
right. Well, we would have never even known where they were, or that there was a road that led us there. So, and it was really a lot of work for Judy. The way she organized things, we paid kind of a set amount at the start of the trip, and then anytime we had a meal or a hotel or a guest house, anything, she paid for it. So she kind of knew what the budget was for assuming however many meals and nights accommodation, and we kind of paid her, and then she sorted it out.
And she's getting preferential pricing, I'm sure.
Yeah,
for
because
this, or prices you wouldn't get, especially as a tourist.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So like these are just, if you affiliate yourself with organizations who have efficiencies like that, or that are aligned too, and you get to give back so much. You were teaching locals.
I was basically a hanger-on.
Yeah, but you were part of this.
But yeah, Mark was helping to run teaching workshops for local teachers.
Yeah,
and I was I was along for the ride, and I always travel with a giant first aid kit, so I was the pharmacist mama.
Yeah, and healthcare professional as well.
Yeah,
it's so much more valuable to travel when you're giving back too. I went to Peru, I got to do some volunteering when I was there, and the volunteer organization hooked me up with the local family, similar to your situation, and I just got to know them. And I got to know, I'm not just staying in a fancy hotel on a mountain and paying exorbitant prices. You get to know how things are done, and you're treated a little bit like a local as well. Right. And you get to give back. And that's all you can hope for when you travel, is to not make it any worse.
Absolutely.
Hopefully you make it a little bit better, too.
Yeah, and I found you then get more contact with the culture, and you get to kind of understand what life is like there a little bit more than, like you said, if you're staying in a hotel or being a regular tourist. So we often say that we're travelers rather than tourists.
Yeah, travelers.
We try more so to kind of reduce our footprint wherever we go.
And I guess, so we talked about how to do this and the value of spending your money. And I mean, it seems like it's not an investment, but what are the returns, like, I guess, non-financial returns for you for traveling, other than the marriage therapy that we talked about?
Yeah. I think just having a broader understanding of the world and being more accepting of people around us. I think about situations I've seen in Canada where people are maybe disparaging someone who's come from away who maybe doesn't speak English very well. And I think, there's so many places that I've gone that I can barely speak the language, and people have been so kind and so welcoming and so lovely with me that, that I bring that home with me, and I try to be helpful and kind to anybody that I meet.
And so it's really just perspective. It's everything. Perspective is everything, because, it helps you make a better life for yourself. Find out what you might want to do too, and all of these things have financial impact. Yeah, when you have this goal or this, you're not spending wastefully either. Right. And that, obviously you're saving, and then you can figure out how to do things more efficiently. That's why I wanted to have you on the show to talk about this, because it's so important, it's so valuable, and I think people stay in their bubble a lot. Yeah,
and that kind of makes me think also, like, getting outside my bubble helped me. I was walking away from a job that I didn't love on my honeymoon, and being away from this working world that I've been working so hard to get into. I worked so much during my schooling and so much my first couple of years as a pharmacist. Stepping away from that allowed me to kind of figure out why I wasn't happy in my current job and what kind of things I could find in a future job that would make me happy. And it allowed me to find my footing when I got home to learn more about myself and figure out what would make me happy as a pharmacist.
We just need to step away sometimes.
Yeah, and I've gone through a couple iterations since the honeymoon. I've had a couple of jobs that have led me to where I am now, and I love my job, and I'm very happy as a pharmacist. So that's another added benefit as well.
If you feel a little bit lost or just stuck, right? Travel is great for that.
Yeah, there's such freedom of thought when you're not stressed about everything else that's going around you.
And people are like, well, I'm just spending money.
Right.
But no, it's like, it is an investment in you, and now you're able to make more money because you're working in a job that you like, and you don't, you're happier that way. And often you get more opportunities too, because you're more open-minded, because you have better perspective. It all just adds up. And take whatever time you have. If you have a restricted time, that's always the challenge for people.
For sure.
But if you have an opportunity to take a break from something, and, I was lucky, I had a 2-month break between jobs, and that's when I traveled down to Peru, and that's exactly what I needed. And everything lined up for you in terms of let's take this time off and then we'll like restart when we get back, right? And the good thing is don't go into debt for this. That's
right. Yeah,
that's probably
that would be a lot harder.
A lot harder coming back to debt. But even then, like, some people, if you had to accidentally go into debt, at least you have this experience, and I think the perspective helps you find where you're headed, and then maybe you pay off that debt when you get back. But I'm so glad that you were able to do this. The 2 babies and all of this is hard for us to coordinate, and it's like we realized we couldn't find a good time on the trip.
We thought that this was a great traveling would be a great time to talk about travel, because we always talk about travel when we're traveling.
Exactly.
But it was not.
No, it's because you do need a quiet place, a quiet-ish place for an hour.
And our babies seem to like to sleep at opposite times. So
which we found out.
Yes, unfortunately.
I think they started doing it on purpose. This is good because episode 99 seemed like a really good place for this. Thank you so much, Beth.
Thank you, Bo, for having me. It's always fun to talk about travel.
And we can talk about later whether you want me to put a link for people to contact you
Sounds
about,
good.
Travel or concussion or anything like that. Anything you're willing to talk about, you make that choice. You don't have to make it now. And next week is episode 100.
Wow.
And I wanted to make it very meaningful. It's about privilege. Financial privilege, what all of that means, what different levels of privilege do to your ability to earn money, things like that. And so I have amazing...
Follows this conversation well.
Right? Amazing special guests, the host of the Fairer Sense podcast, Tanya and Kara. And by chance, I was a mentor down at FinCon, and my mentee, James, is so well-versed in privilege. I said, you're coming on the show. And he's number 4 on the panel. So we have a great conversation. So as a nice bonus to have James on, and I'm really excited about that, and I'll see you all next week.